Good morning. I was just out in my garden getting some final measurements because I'm starting my planning process for this spring's garden. And it got me to thinking. I've been seeing a question a lot on the internet on different social media channels, and that question is, how exactly do you plan a garden? It can be a daunting question, especially if you're just starting out. And I wish there was a one-size-fits-all kind of answer to that question. But I don't think there is. Gardening is such a deeply personal endeavor. I would always encourage you to find the planning process that works well for you and in your own garden. Some people are really detail oriented, some people could care less, so it's important to find what works for you. That being said, I would always advise you to talk to other gardeners, listen to ideas, get tips and tricks that other people have used, try them in your own process and see what works really well for you. Now, today I'd like to share with you my own garden planning process in hopes that you can do just that. Maybe glean some little useful nuggets from my process and use it in your own. The first step in the planning process is to make a giant wish list. I always sit down in late December, early January with my giant stack of gardening catalogs, my notebook and my pen, and I make wish lists from every single catalog. Do not skip this step. It is the most fun in the whole process, besides the actual gardening. Just go crazy. Write down everything you're interested in. If you had unlimited resources and space and time, you will wean down the list later. But this is a really fun exercise to do in the dead of winter when there's not a lot of gardening to be had. The next step is figuring how much space you have available. So if you've already got devoted beds, in-ground or raised beds, just figure out your total square footage and dimensions. If you know that you're going to work some ground up in the spring, factor that in as well. But just get a rough idea of how much actual space you have to work with. Once you've figured the amount of space that you have available, you can sit down and make your actual garden plan on paper. Now, there are plenty of good garden planning apps out there. Some are free, a lot of them require payment. Some will do a free trial for like 7 days. I've tried different versions of these programs in the past and they are a lot of fun to play with, but I really have ultimately found them unnecessary. My go-to now is just using an Excel spreadsheet where every cell denotes 1 square foot, and that works really well for me. I also keep a log each year of the spacing on all my vegetables so that I can easily pop that into my garden chart the following year and know exactly how much space is required for any given crop. Now, I will tell you, if you're anything like me, your garden will never actually look like your garden plans. It's a good idea to do them anyway, just because it does give you a realistic perception of the space and what you can grow. But don't fret if your beans end up where your tomatoes were originally charted and if your map doesn't look anything like your final garden in the spring. So the next step is to figure out what you absolutely need to grow. Only you are going to know the answer to this. Do you grow for market? Do you grow to feed your family? Are you only eating your crops fresh out of the garden, or do you preserve food for the winter? There are a lot of different variables that go into factoring how much you actually need to grow. Now, if you're feeding your family, there are some handy charts online that will actually show you an estimate of how much you should grow to feed a, say, like 4-person family. But I found that the best figures just come from experience. I've actually started keeping a log on my pantry and my freezer that when I put food away in the summer and fall, I actually log each thing that I put in the freezer or pantry, and as we use it, we cross it off. So at the end of the season, I can see, well, we used up all our applesauce by December, and we had 30 packages of blueberries left over. I can kind of adjust my figures for the following year. So once you know what you absolutely need to grow, figure how much space will be needed for those crops. You can plug these into your garden plan as you go, and then if you have room left over, you get to move on to the next step, which is, what do I want to grow? These are things that you don't necessarily need to feed your family, but you're really interested in trying, or you've never grown before, or say it's just a new variety of something like a tomato that you've never tried before and you don't know how it will perform. you can allocate your remaining space to these wants, kind of things from your wish list that you made back at the beginning of the winter. So the next thing that I do is make an organized list. I use Excel for this, but you may find that a handwritten list in a notebook works just as well. So as I mentioned in the beginning, my process is very detailed. You can see here on my trial list, this is my list of everything that I will be growing in the spring. I've got a lot of information for every variety that I'm growing. So I include genus, species, common name, the variety name. I like to pick up the information from the catalog that I bought it from as far as how they describe the variety. I've got days to maturity, and then as far as my own note taking, I include all kinds of information. So I like to gather the size of the plant, the size of the crop or the fruiting part of the plant itself, details about the color and texture, the disease resistances, any insects that I notice on the plants. So this is the part where I feel like you may not need all this detail, but at the very least, I would recommend including what the variety was, the catalog that you bought it from, and a place where you can put in a few notes after you've grown it and see whether you like it or not. This will help a lot when you're getting ready to plan next year's garden and you're like, I really liked that tomato I grew last year, but what was that called and who did I get that from? And oh yeah, I really didn't want to grow that pepper, but I don't remember which one it was. You can just go back and look at your notes and easily see what you liked and what you didn't. And if there's stuff that you want to reorder the following year, you've got all the information down already. I also find it useful to have some sort of a seed organization system set up. Now you can buy pretty little boxes and tins from any gardening center or online, and these are really nice if you just have a small amount of seeds that you're dealing with. I was gifted this one and it's lovely, but I found that I just have too many seeds to use something like this. So I've gone to a system of just using Tupperware bins, and within each bin I put gallon Ziploc bags and label the crop, and then all my seed packets go inside the gallon Ziploc bags. And then as I get closer to planting time, I like to organize all of my crops in the bins according to planting time. So I'll put all of my early sown crops in one bin. I'll put all of my warm season direct sown crops in another. I'll put large seeded direct sown crops like squash and beans and corn in another bin, so that I know when it's February and I should be starting cruciferous crops in the greenhouse, I can just pull out my bin and basically sow everything that's within it. And the last part of my process now is making sure that I have all of my supplies ready. I have been burnt so many times where I've had all of my list really organized. I've had all my seed ordered. I'd have all of this information typed into my Excel spreadsheet. I get all my seeds in, it's like April and I'm getting ready to jump in the garden, I'm so excited, and then I realize I'm missing like a spade or like, I don't know, potting soil or something to start my seeds in. And then I inevitably have to make a rush to the local big box store, which I don't like to do, and pick up something because I need it that day. Because you know how gardening is. When that weather breaks and you want to get out there, you want to get out there now. So it's really nice to make sure that you have everything that you'll need as soon as that weather breaks, or as soon as you want to be starting seeds indoors. Well, I hope that you were able to find some useful tidbits out of my planning process, and I'd love to hear from you. Is there any method that you have used for planning your garden that has worked really well? It's always nice to hear from other gardeners. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.